7 years since Gilad Shalit's release, the families of the fallen Israeli soldiers Hadar, Goldin and Oron Shaul are now the focal point of new discussions around a potential prisoner swap with Hamas. Goldin and Shaul were captured and killed by Hamas during Operation Protective Edge in 2014. Their bodies have never been returned to Israel. Earlier I spoke with Leah, the mother of Hadar Goldin. Take a look. Dr. Goldin, a pleasure to speak with you. Now, you find yourself in not only a heartbreaking but a very unique situation that most people certainly wouldn't be able to relate to. So it's important for us to get your perspective on this. To your mind, should no deal be reached with Hamas that doesn't begin with the return of your son's body?
From our perspective, we expect our Prime Minister, Bibi Netanyahu, that only a month ago told the whole world that there is not going to be any Hadar, any arrangement without return the soldiers first and the missing citizens. And I don't understand why you call it no deal. We have to have a deal. We have to sort the humanitarian situation in Gaza and in the border. But as part of that deal, the return of the soldiers is the first thing to be done, because this is our major and the most important value, to return our soldiers back home.
Sure. Should that be the prerequisite to a deal? Should no other deal be penned or agreed upon without the return of your son's body being in the first part of a negotiation?
I don't like the wording first part. I don't like the wording prerequisite. The whole idea is to factor in the resolution of my son's return into any humanitarian aid provided to Gaza, as was discussed at the UN Security Council and as we discussed at the European Parliament. I mean, there is an international humanitarian law for all. On one hand, one should be committed to the humanitarian imperative to sort the humanitarian crisis in Gaza, but as part of it, the one that provides the humanitarian aid to Gaza is responsible to resolve our case and put a closure to this standing violation of the international humanitarian law. And how to do it? We have enough professionals from all sides to find the right solution.
When you hear that there are talks of an agreement that could be reached between Israel and Hamas, and that the return of your son's body would be something that only comes later, if at all, what are your thoughts?
My thoughts are very, very bad, because my son was killed on August 1st, 2014, 2 hours after ceasefire was declared. I mean, in our case, it's a brutal violation of the international humanitarian law. Violating ceasefire is something that is unacceptable. Now, before any solution can start, we should have a ceasefire in place, and it's not reasonable to initiate a new ceasefire and without resolving the problem with the previous ceasefire, which is my son. So it's not my wish, it's not anyone's wish, it's the law, and that's what we have to follow.
How does it feel, Dr. Goldin, that your son is in many ways being used as a negotiating tool?
Yeah, this is very, very bad. I would say it's used as a bargaining chip. I mean, unfortunately, Israel has this problem for the last 30 years that we have to fight with terrorists from north and south. I mean, the way of kidnapping soldiers and then using them as a bargaining chip is well known. But now it's the kidnapping of fallen soldiers, which is much worse. And in this perspective, the international humanitarian law is very strict, because this is a violation of principles, values, you know, capturing helpless people, preventing from decent burial according to all religions, and human dignity. I mean, this feels very, very bad personally as a family, because, you know, we feel like we run with a knife stuck into our heart, because after all, there is no happy end in our story. But the way to go is first to resolve this violation of the humanitarian law before proceeding to anything, any bargain, any deal, any asdara that the humanitarian concept is attached to.
Now, of course, you understand that when it comes to negotiations and anything in life, many people say nothing comes for free. As a mother of a soldier whose body is being kept by Hamas, how do you view the outrage that was expressed by those that were unhappy about the prisoner swap of Gilad Shalit, of course, today being the anniversary of when he was returned to Israel?
Look, as I said before, we are used to the way of kidnapping soldiers and then declaring the price for Israel in terms of releasing sentenced terrorists. But that is the new thing and new paradigm we are already trying to promote for the last 3 years. It's about time to flip the equation. It's about time to declare a price to the Hamas and other terrorists that use this technique of kidnapping soldiers and use them as a bargaining chip. It's about time to set the price for them for holding our soldiers and for kidnapping in the first place. I mean, this is a new paradigm that we tried to promote for the last 3 years. So in the future, they will not dare to do it, because they know it's not an asset anymore, holding and kidnapping soldiers, but it's more like a burden.
What should the price be? You said it's time for Israel to set the price.
Israel to set the price, along with the international community that brokered this ceasefire and is responsible for the return of Hadar and Oron. I mean, this should be as a united effort according to the international humanitarian law. And when I hate to call it a deal or bargaining, it's actually supposed to be an agreement, because with every war, at the end of the war, since ancient history, the two sides actually exchanged prisoners of war, and we have to go back to this. And this would be the acceptable price of ending a war, because if we discuss humanitarian aid and if we are aiming towards peace agreement, we should stick to our basic values and not give up. It's not part of the deal. It's a credibility test. It's a credibility check, so we would know that we can count on the other side.
You've talked about,
which up till now we're violating everything.
You've talked about swapping prisoners of war as one of the options. Now, many of the prisoners that were released in that swap with Gilad Shalit were, of course, terrorists, some who returned back to terror and some causing more deaths. Does the return of your son's body come at any cost?
We hope, and there is no way to repeat the Gilad Shalit way of doing things, especially now that Yahya Sinwar is the top terrorist that was released with the Gilad Shalit deal. He was sentenced to more than 450 years for killing more Palestinians than Israelis. So we are dealing now with the top person in Gaza that is actually an he was sentenced. He was released in Gilad Shalit. This is not anymore the way to go. It's not acceptable. So now it's the time to take advantage of the situation in our region, where all the international community and the United States are leading this effort to find some larger solution for Gaza, for Sinai, together with the Egyptian, and together bring back our basic values and make sure, like President Trump released a terrorist in North Korea, that the return of our soldier would be used as a credibility check, and don't try to call it prerequisite or other things, like you do with any business case, with any business agreement. You do a credibility check to your partners in order to know that you can count on them and proceed. This is what should be done now. and this is the way to go.
Now, at the end of the day, this isn't a negotiating or a bargaining chip. This is your son. What would it mean to you to have his body returned and to be able to give him a proper burial?
I mean, this is our basic principles. First of all, to put a closure to our suffer. I mean, the duality and the uncertainty that we are living now is unacceptable. It's a terror against families, and eventually it's a terror against society. That's why I keep talking about principled values. And for us, bringing him back to Israel for a decent burial, as he deserves, as an excellent soldier and as an excellent person, this is something we owe to him. We owe it to our soldiers that are going to be fighting in the next war, and know that we will bring them back home as it always been done.